Bonjour, bonjour, everybody. It is December 2nd, 2025. But I came down here to Notre Dame today to tell you a little story about what happened here 221 years ago today, December 2nd, 1804. At about 10:30 in the morning, it was very cold. It was windy. There was even reports of snow on the ground. And one gentleman, Napoleon Bonaparte, and a large contingency of people came here to Notre Dame for his coronation. And he was already named the Emperor of France back in May of 1804, but he wanted to have a celebration and a coronation. And so he, in everything he was doing to unlink his rule to the past monarchy of France, which was always crowned for the most part at Notre Dame in Reims, up in the Champagne region, he decided to have his coronation here in the center of Paris at Notre Dame. So the whole thing was orchestrated and put together. He had a artist, Isabi, and then he also had Percier and Fontaine, who were his architects who did a lot of the work under him, including in the Louvre, to basically design this coronation. They had, some reports say, up to 30,000 people in here at Notre Dame. I think that's maybe a little bit over how many, even though they did add a lot of risers up in the balconies. And stay tuned to the very end of this, because I'm going to put a bunch of pictures on here from paintings and illustrations of what that looked like inside. I'm going to put those on at the very end, so hang on for those. But they had also created a whole entire facade out here, huge entrance, and then also on the back. So when they arrived, they came from the Palais des Tuileries, and they came through the streets. The Pope left first at 9 in the morning. Pope Pius VII was here in Paris. He came first with his contingency, and they arrived. And then shortly after he had left the Tuileries, Napoleon and then Josephine and everybody had also left. So it took quite a while to get through to the streets, because there was 4,000 to 5,000 people lining the streets to get here, even though it was very cold and snowing. They arrived here at Notre Dame at the back side, and they came in and they went to the Archbishop's Palace that was here at the time, no longer remains, and when that is where they put on their imperial robes and everything, and then entered inside the church. So it was quite the occasion. There was one woman that was the wife of one of the marshals of Napoleon, and she pretty much documented all of it. She had also been a lady in waiting to Josephine, and she documented the whole thing, and it was kind of like, the salacious gossip column of the time. So we know a little bit more about the ceremony inside because of that. And, most famously because of the painting by David that is in the Louvre. It is everybody knows, it says, how he took the crown and placed it on his own head. But that had actually already been decided on the day before. They just didn't update the flyers that were given to everybody with the whole timeline of what was going to happen that day. So that was actually the day before. Usually everybody says like, oh, he just ripped it off of the altar and placed it on his head, but he had kind of already decided that he was going to do that. So I'm going to take you inside, and it was exciting because last year was a big 220 anniversary of it, but Notre Dame wasn't open. And so Notre Dame opened last year on December 7th to the dignitaries, and December 8th was the first day that people were able to come in. And so it's been almost a year. So I'm going to do another video that's going to come out this weekend that I'll do about what has happened in the last year, the new things that have been added, and then also what's to come, because there's still a ton of work to come, as you can see out here around. But let's pop inside. I'm also going to hopefully take you into the treasury to show you some of the pieces that were used in the actual ceremony of the coronation. Just inside the door here, I'm just on the north side. This is where they had built a huge riser with about 32 steps that went up to the top. And there was a throne there for Napoleon and one for Josephine. And they put it here so it was kind of out of the eyesight of the Pope, because they had the ceremony, and then following the ceremony, the imperial couple went up to their thrones and sat there, and then they did a mass. And so Napoleon, they did not take part in the actual mass, so they were put back here, so they were kind of out of the eyesight of the Pope where he was sitting, and they kind of did that on purpose. So Napoleon had invited the Pope here specifically because he was aligning himself with the church. The Concordat was passed just before that, earlier in the year, and so they had brought back the religious ceremonies into the churches, which were completely abolished during the revolution. So he was bringing the Pope here to link himself to that, but also linking himself to Charlemagne, because Napoleon didn't have any royal heritage. He kind of created it by constantly linking himself and talking about Charlemagne, and also using many of the things that were redesigned to match Charlemagne's, including the crown, which he also did, which I'll have a picture of that. And Charlemagne is, of course, today outside of the cathedral, just there on the Parve. But the church had been falling apart. It was in really, really bad shape. And so it had been falling apart because of the revolution, just literally crumbling. And at one point, the city tried to even sell it off for stones, like, come take it and use the stones. And people weren't biting it. They didn't want it. And so thankfully for us, I guess. But so he had Percier Fontaine. They covered the walls with cardboard that was painted to look like stone. They had huge tapestries hung in here with the stories of the Bible. And I'll have another picture you can see at the end of kind of give you an idea of what that looked like. But the whole place was just really in really bad shape. So they had decided to put it all back together for this one occasion. And again, this is 1804, so it's 40 years before the restoration of Viollet-le-Duc. So just imagine how bad of shape it really was in. This is, we're in between the post-Thanksgiving. It gets very busy the week of Thanksgiving in Paris with tourists. And then right around about the week before Christmas, it starts to get very busy again. But there was really nobody walking in when I came in. So it's a great time to be here. I brought in my handy visual aid. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the whole painting in it because you cannot see the Pietà, but just standing right outside here where this would have taken place. So it kind of lines up. You have the same column right here, lines up there. They don't have the two statues. So the statue of Louis XIV over there, they don't have that. But the Pietà normally is in the painting. Unfortunately, on this cutout I bought at the Louvre, they don't have the Pietà. But the ceremony would have taken place right here. And so you kind of get, you see in here where the mother is, there in the very center. And then you see the people above it. So they would have built risers here. And then you also had the upper level. So they did have in that open section there, they would have had two levels of where people could sit. So they would have definitely gotten a lot more people in here than normally. I think it fits about 2,000 people sitting, just as it is now in the nave. But from the painting, you know, the altar that was back there was created for the ceremony because the one during the revolution that had been here before was destroyed. So that one was created for, and it used to sit in this chapel right back here before the fire. It's in the chapel of Saint Georges, and I don't know what happened to it, but it is not there anymore. And it was taken out and nothing has ever been said about that. But it used to be right here, and this is where the candlesticks were pre-fire. So the candlesticks that are now in the treasury, which I'm hopefully going to take you in and show you, they would have sat right here with the altar that was created for the celebration. But now you have in here, this is the Saint Georges. So you have Saint Georges up here. And if you want to see more about Notre Dame, I did a bazillion videos about pretty much every single detail in Notre Dame. And you can find all those here on my YouTube, as I have them all even kept together in one linked folder, so you could watch all of those. But it is quite nice and quite empty, considering this is not very busy. But I'm excited to go into the treasury. It's pretty fantastic. You do have to pay a ticket to go see this. And it's not very big, but it's got some pretty cool stuff in it. We made it in, and these candlesticks were probably one of my most favorite discoveries long before the fire, that they were still here in the cathedral. They've moved them into the treasury now, but these are the candlesticks, and you can see them right here in the painting, and he does a pretty good job. Look at that. Now look at here at the base. They were originally, they date to 1710. They were in the cathedral in Arras, which is in the north of France, and they were brought down to Paris to celebrate Easter in 1802. And they were here to be just temporarily, but they decided to keep them, and they were originally all silver, so they were silver gilt. And then they decided in September of 1804 that they wanted them to be gold. So a gentleman was put in charge of regilding them. And then they were brought here and placed on the altar. They were on the altar up until Viollet-le-Duc, up until 1844. But they had been damaged a few times during the looting. The treasury here in the cathedral had been looted quite a few times. Actually see a little hole right there in the center of that one, but I think they all have that. So but they had been damaged, dropped, and some of the bases had been damaged, but they've all been restored. Aren't they just gorgeous? I think this is when I just wish things like this could just talk and tell me their stories and all the things they have seen. In the painting, he has 7. You can't see that here in this large postcard, but he put 7 candlesticks in there when there's just 6. And then you have this piece that is in the middle that you could also see here in the painting, right there, with the crucifix. So this little back corner, this was the new part of the treasury. This wasn't open before the fire, as far as this little hallway here. And this is where they put some of the stuff from the coronation. That piece in the back, that beautiful red velvet, that was also, it was created from some of the mantles, which are the large capes that they wore. And then originally it had ends on there and bees, but those were taken off during the restoration and starting in 1814. And then you have some of the other items here. But this cape here is stunning, and they had 16 of these made, and look at how gorgeous they are. And it's got these flowers and baskets and grapes. They had originally 16 of these done. Only 3 remain because some of them were, when they set this on fire at one point, the Archbishop's palace, they destroyed a lot of them. So this one has most likely been restored in 1830. It's still amazing. And you could see it, again, right here in the painting. Look at that. So that is the Abbé Salama, and he's holding the processional cross, which is right here, that they still used for ceremonies up until 2019. But some of the other items in here don't date to the actual ceremony, but you do have these pieces. But this is pretty amazing. This has a reliquary of a piece of the Virgin Mary and Saint Louis.